Hi, my name is Abigail Kima. I am the host and producer of the Hali Hewa podcast with a focus on climate and energy in Africa. It was a historic moment because the summit was the first of its kind, and for the very first time, Africa was coming together to discuss issues that are pertinent to the continent without external influence. Well, that's debatable because a group of civil society organizations, youth groups, indigenous communities came together to protest against the trajectory of the agenda of the summit weeks before it starts, raising different issues. Some of the issues they raised was that one, the summit was led by a non-African firm. Secondly, they felt that the agenda on climate justice was missing in the conversation. And lastly, they talked about carbon offsets and carbon markets, which meant that it was giving leeway for big emitters to keep polluting in the name of accessing climate finance for the African continent. In one of the conversations I had on the podcast at the Africa Climate Summit was that the Africa Climate Summit was full of deal rooms, and in fact, when you go on the social media streets, you'll definitely find the Africa Climate Summit deal book. Do we want to talk about how hard it was to access the summit? Maybe not. On a positive note, African leaders came together to sign the Nairobi Declaration, and some of the commitments or issues that they put forward was one, $600 billion to be committed to triple our renewable energy capacity, knowing that about 600 million Africans still do not have access to energy. Secondly, they also called for the restructuring of the multilateral financial system, which we know for a long time has been quite unfavorable to the African continent. And another big conversation was on green minerals, and we know that Africa is a host to about 30 to 40% of the minerals that we need for green transition globally. And on another positive note was the fact that African youth came together for the Africa Youth Climate Assembly and also put forward the Africa Youth Climate Declaration. And for the first time, we had an opportunity to present this declaration to African leaders, citing some of the issues that are affecting us, that are pertinent to us, and some of the issues that we want to put forward to ensure that our voices are heard and our engagement with powers are not just symbolic or cosmetic, but are actually meaningful, making sure that our voices are heard. My highlight at the Africa Climate Summit was the fact that I had an opportunity to have conversations with brilliant experts from across Africa on various issues that were in the agenda items for the Africa Climate Summit, including transition, including loss and damage, including green minerals for Africa. So why are these issues so important? We are gearing up for COP28 happening in the UAE, and this particular summit was important to make sure that Africa goes to the COP in one voice. And of course, the Nairobi Declaration sets the pace for us in terms of what we want the COP28 to deliver for the African continent. But this is not to say other issues were not missed. We still have loss and damage, we still have technology, we still have climate finance that is definitely going to make it to the conversations. And therefore, it was really important that we come together as Africa to say this is exactly what we want the COP process to deliver for us moving forward. We will be sure to keep the conversation going here on the Hali Hewa podcast, and you can find us on YouTube, on Apple Podcast, on Spotify and Google Podcast. And for social media, you can follow us at Hali Hewa Podcast on all social media platforms.